on and check the boxes, make myself available for any reaction to most of what I saw. I didn't have a chance to see the entirety of the 3 hours, but I saw a good hour and a half and got a flavor of the arguments and certainly the questions from the court. And don't read the tea leaves, don't make any predictions. That's never prudent in these circumstances. But I think it's reassuring, based on the arguments that I did hear in the questions, that the 18,000 marriages, I think, look increasingly intact. And I'm certainly hopeful, based on the flavor of the discussions, that that's the case, though, again, by no means am I predicting or suggesting or reading the minds of the judges. However, the issue of revision versus amendment, clearly that standard is more challenging today, and I think just goes to the question that was presented. I think was hardly, conclusive in terms of the sense that I picked up that they're going in that direction, meaning they're going to follow argument. You guys are the pundits. I'm not a pundit, but I think it's going to be it's a challenging. I think it's a compelling question. I think it's the right question. I think they did an outstanding job. Teresa Stewart, as always, one of the great superstars. Not just happens to be a city attorney. My gosh, are we lucky? She is one of the best and brightest legal minds out there, and she did a magnificent job. But I don't know that this court was convinced. I don't know. I didn't sense that. I don't. Beyond that, any questions? Unless you all feel differently. You may have all seen the entire 3 hours. I just have to say I picked up an hour and a half.
I wasn't there, so I don't have an impression one way or the other. You're almost sounding a little pessimistic.
No, just sounding actually very realistic. Sounding exactly as I did 3 hours ago. Point being, I didn't get any conclusive evidence or suggestion of where they're going, except that I feel more reinforced in terms of the 18,000 marriages. That's my point. I guess on that point, I feel a greater sense of confidence and hopefulness that those 18,000 couples will have their rights preserved. On the other question, I'm candidly suggesting that I can't read the minds of anyone, and thought we made a good, compelling case, particularly Teresa Stewart, and we'll see.
Mayor, your observation makes me wonder if you've had possibly city attorneys with you or legal minds.
No. I was just one of the tens of thousands of pundits out there for that hour and a half that I watched, and I tried to read the minds of these judges. And the only experience I have is knowing 2 or 3 of them personally, having a sense of their histories and their records, and having lived with a father who spent a great deal of his career doing the same work, and getting a sense of why you're asking that question. Is it really asking that because you already know the answer? Are you asking that to say you at least exhausted the opposition point of view because you really feel this way? You know the usual punditry that goes into this. But there's sort of the Socratic method as well that was being advanced by the judges, and it was interesting, as always, an interesting constitutional debate.
What was it you heard from one of the justices to make you think they...
No, the idea of stripping away the rights of 18,000 couples retroactively, I don't think there was a very compelling argument to do that, and I don't sense from the judges that they were overwhelmed by any argument in that direction. So I feel some confidence there is the point. But again, hopefulness, I should say, not confidence. Again, I can't read their minds and don't know which way they're going. It's always hard to predict. But I think on the larger question of revision, the issue of the inalienable rights, I didn't know that went so well. But again, I'll leave that to you. That may have just gone down a different path than I think everyone expected. It was interesting. You have Attorney General opposing our argument and then advancing a third-way argument. It was sort of an interesting position for them to be in, but glad they had an argument, at least in the totality, that was favorable. But the compelling point of the low threshold, which I think Chief Justice George brought up, said, comparing Massachusetts and the fact that you get a constitution done there in a very different manner than the low bar that it could be done here. Of course, Teresa Stewart's comment was, well, we have a low bar and we have a higher bar, and that's a revision, and this belongs in that higher bar, that higher threshold of revision. So again, good arguments, but hard to predict. Hard to predict.
On that note about Mr. George's comment about the difficulty of passing an amendment, should Prop 8 be upheld, would you support changing the state constitution to make it more difficult to pass propositions such as this?
I don't know. I'm compelled to focus first on the notion that we could change the Constitution with a majority, but you can't get a budget passed without 2/3. It seems rather perverse. So you either raise the bar for both or lower the bar for one. So, I don't know. I think there is, as Teresa said, look, there is a process. It's a revision. The revision does have an appropriate threshold, 2/3, which I think is an appropriate threshold for a dramatic change of a Constitution, and I think this was. Taking someone's fundamental rights away seems to me rather dramatic. Of course, Whittaker's comment was, well, isn't the death penalty also a rather fundamental and dramatic cause to which one would presume the same, and we already adjudicated that that's simple amendment, not a revision. And so making compelling argument, and she led very strongly with that. And so again, that's why I'm not being pessimistic. I'm sort of sensing what you all sense when you heard the question and answer session, that it's hardly unanimous from my perspective, or there's hardly unanimity in the concept that coming from our point of view that our arguments were overwhelmingly embraced. I don't think anyone would suggest that, but they were, I think, eloquently made.
Just looking down the line, a year ago at the 4th anniversary of same-sex marriage that you allowed here in City Hall, you made a statement saying that you believe very strongly that inevitably this was going to happen one way or the other. So could you look to the future and kind of see how you think this might happen, if it either through this court ruling or through some other process? You still feel as strong?
Yeah, time's on our side. I mean, it's generational. I continue to say that. It's remarkably generational. And I know that anecdotally from talking to people, and you know that from surveys that have been done. Democrats, Republicans at a certain age or younger, they don't necessarily get this. They don't understand that frustration and that angst that you see behind me out in the streets. And so I do think that time will ultimately resolve this issue. But I don't want to hold back my advocacy and passion for this, and I don't think anyone that was arguing on behalf of the No on 8 side today wants to delay that any more than we can. Point being, we want to push that. We want to ultimately get to that day sooner than later. And so I imagine if we are unsuccessful with this court decision, there'll be another ballot initiative. If we're successful, I imagine the other side will move forward similarly. So this is hardly the last word, regardless of what happens. Again, I just fear, and I want to underscore this, there was not just the one question that was being asked two different ways as it relates to inalienable rights or revision amendment. There was also the more, to me, substantive issue because of the human aspect of it, and that's 18,000 couples that their entire lives are sitting there in the hands of 7 California Supreme Court justices, and that's a pretty powerful thing. I mean, if someone said, I got married during that period of time that same-sex couples got married, if someone was determining my fate in my relationship, legal and otherwise, I mean, our property rights, there are a lot of legal constructs here, and determining that fate and the validity of my marriage, that's a pretty personal thing. That's a very powerful thing. And it's not just to the 18,000 couples, it's to their mothers and fathers, their best friends, the people that celebrated with them. So there are hundreds of thousands of people that candidly care deeply about the revision question and the inalienable right and the amendment question, but that's secondary to their personal lives that are at question here. And that's why I feel a little bit more hopeful than I was at 9 a.m. that their rights will be preserved. I just say that with expectation of some optimism as it relates to what ultimately will be adjudicated by the court.
What's the ballot measure going to look like? Is it going to be anything different from what we saw in the past?
Well, it depends.
And what would you do?
If we're successful today, yeah, they'll have to come up with something very creative on a ballot initiative and go through the Assembly and the State Senate. Good luck getting 2/3 if they have to put forward a revision. A little bit different if the threshold is 50% plus 1. I guess we have to go back and with a constitutional amendment, and if the court says it's all you need is 50%, which is very alarming, because your rights are next, my rights are next. I mean, it's perverse as Everyone, I think even Ron George says I'm 21 and younger, can't do X, Y, and Z. African Americans can't get married. You can only marry people of your race or only of this race, but you have to be a certain age. You can get really perverse with this. And apparently all you need, if we're unsuccessful, is 50% of the vote. It's a very ominous thing, and that goes to the whole argument here about whether or not this should be a revision or an amendment. But again, as Ron George said, maybe that's not a legal question as much as a political one now, and raising the threshold to your question of whether or not we need to change that threshold through legislative action and then ultimate concurrence of the voters. Constitutional convention and things like that.
The 18,000 people that you mentioned, certainly their legal rights will probably be preserved. Are you hopeful that they will be able to say that they are married?
Yes. Oh, absolutely. And I maintain some real optimism there. Retroactivity was never, it may have been implied by the proponents of Prop 8, but I was out on that campaign trail as much or more than anybody. I didn't hear much about that. And I think that the arguments were rather compelling, that they were not overtly in terms of the intentionality of the campaign or the legalese of those 14 words looking to get a retroactive provision. I think it was just candidly a bonus from the perspective of those that just cannot imagine or stand the idea of two people of the same sex cohabitating, let alone be married. So I just feel a little more strongly that that will be successful there. And maybe that's the outcome, right? You lose on this, but you win on that, and we go back to the process once again in 2 years. Time's on our side, better campaign, more compelling arguments, humanize this issue, reach out to diverse communities, be more unified, realize what's at stake, become more collaborative in terms of our approach, and we'll get there. So again, that's a point of real optimism. I'm not convinced of anything, but I am confident that ultimately that will happen.
There's so much of this whole battle has hinged on the word marriage.
Yes.
That everyone wants to be able to use the word marriage. And you referred a moment ago to all of the concrete rights that were at stake. Even if you lose this, it would be possible, wouldn't it, for the legislature to avail couples of all of those rights that fall under the term marriage, wouldn't it?
Yeah, but that's wrong, because separate's not equal. And we don't believe in that, and we're celebrating this year the 55th anniversary, coincidentally, of Brown versus Board of Education. Separate is not equal. And I don't think that we should stand for separate status for the gay community, but not separate status based on race or ethnicity. And so it's a principle that is completely at odds with everything we believe here in San Francisco, or I believe certainly in everything the Democratic Party has always stood for. And that's why I think the most challenged people right now are Democratic leaders that will be celebrating Brown versus Board of Education this year and will give eloquent speeches about separate not being equal and rights, and then argue for civil unions for the gay community. I'm just glad I won't be up there with them making that argument. I don't know how that one's going to fly. And so I don't believe that those...
I wasn't saying that was right or wrong or good or bad, but that at the essence of this really is the right to be able to get married, as
right.
Even more than whatever concrete rights might come with it, because you
Absolutely.
can legislate all of those concrete rights, that the only thing you really can't legislate is that right to get married and call it we're
profoundly, married. It's a profound thing, because marriage is marriage, civil unions are civil unions. There's a reason $40 million was spent to make sure that people couldn't enter into the institution of marriage, because folks that put up that money know intimately that the word matters greatly, that there is not equal status. Why would you need to put up all the money if you felt there was equal status? There's not. They know it's a separate status, and they know it's a lesser status. And that's why they want to protect and preserve the sanctity of marriage, as if it's for them exclusively, or for a certain group exclusively. And my argument is, if you believe in full equality, and you really believe in equality, then you've got to avail that opportunity equally, regardless of sexual orientation. So it's not just legislating legalese, it's the symbolism, it's the substance, it's the ability to say, will you marry me? As opposed to, will you civil union me? And Barbara, I don't know if anyone's asked you to civil union you. I know they've asked you to marry. And I know you know the difference as much as more than I do as well.
Assuming we have to go back to the ballot in 2010, how would that play in with your gubernatorial
Oh,
campaign?
who cares? I can, yeah, that one you'll write about. I have no, I am absolutely passionate about this, and there's nothing worse than politicians worrying about their political future more than they worry about the rights of people. And so, to me, the rights of people are much more important. So I hope people move expeditiously, as quickly as they possibly can. I mean, millions of people are being denied their basic fundamental rights. That, to me, is, everyone's criticizing me, not calling our budget crisis a crisis. To me, that's a crisis, when people aren't being treated equally and fairly, and they're not getting their basic human rights advanced, and that needs to be addressed immediately. And that's why we pushed this in 2004. And that's why we're very proud of the great legal work that's being done, not just with our city attorney and the city attorney's office, with Teresa's incredible leadership, but throughout the state with other city attorneys and other communities coming together and supporting this effort. And, it's building. Every day it's building. It's getting, we learn from our mistakes. I've certainly learned from mine, and this coalition's getting stronger, it's getting broader, it's getting deeper, and people now know what's at stake. It's very, very personal now. And I'll tell you, if they take those 18,000 licenses away, then you can't get much more personal than that.
What are your mistakes?
Oh, you don't have enough time to write it all. You've written all about it. You write about them every week. So, we'll just go through the list. I'll check a few off, and a few others will agree to disagree.
You have been traveling around a lot in connection with the gubernatorial campaign. What kind of feedback are you getting in other places around the state about this issue?
One question came up in 10 town halls, and I've been to Placer County, I've been in San Joaquin Valley, I've been down in San Fernando Valley. So I almost wanted to bring it up just so you'd believe me. It's not plausible, is it? I've had 400 or 500 people at these things, and people just... members of the LGBT community say, well, that's great, Mayor. Anyway, my son's health care is very costly, and I think he's going to lose it. Or my father, just lost his home. Or my aunt was just kicked out of her office. She was given 1 hour notice on her job. I've never seen a state more united in my life. I think there's tremendous myth about the sort of inland, the coastal, north, south. Come with me. In fact, Aaron, I know you've been to most of these. You've heard of them. I think one person brought up, and it was really in relationship to their own, hey, thank you very much. And it was interesting. It was a couple that got married, and then she said, and my wife works for IHSS. Will you support advancing the rights of in-home supportive services? I thought, that's perfect. Thank you, and now we're moving on. Or, I oppose you, but what are you going to do about education or the environment? So it's interesting. It's a very different time. Things have changed dramatically from November 4th of last year. The world's changing dramatically. So I just think that's, again, another point of tremendous optimism here. I don't think there's the intensity and furor anymore. I don't think people have the energy to put up the kind of fight that they did a year ago. We've got so many other things we need to be fighting together than fighting against advancing the rights of a certain group of people that have historically been discriminated against.
You talked about a couple of weeks ago on being a new dad, and you solicited advice. Have you gotten advice, and what is the advice?
I'm getting a lot of on my Twitter. People are tweeting different names, and my Facebook as well. But my advice on being a father is take care of the mother of your father. That's the best advice I've received. So trying to take care of my wife.
How's she feeling?
It depends if she reads the Chronicle sometimes, and I told her to stop, and so she's learning from me about how to get through the days. I had to have fun on that. Thanks, guys. Thanks very much.